Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar entitled A Thesis Worth Believing in. My name is Joy Fisher-Williams. I am a marketing manager at Macmillan Learning, and I'm really excited to introduce you to today's speakers. Dr. Michelle Brazier is an associate professor at Raritan Valley Community College. She completed her BA at Yale and her PhD at Rutgers in English Literature, where she was also a WPA, coordinating basic composition. She has taught developmental and first-year composition for more than 20 years. She is also active in the Modern Language Association, where she is former chair of the Delegate Assembly Organizing Committee. Her essay on teaching Gertrude Stein's operas to first-time Stein readers was published in the MLA volume, Approaches to Teaching the Works of Gertrude Stein. Dr. Brazier is a member of the Role of Reading and Composition Studies SIG of the 4 Cs. Dr. Alexa Offenhauer is an assistant professor at Raritan Valley Community College. Alexa received her doctorate in English education from Teachers College, Columbia University, where she focused her study on the history of critical reading in post-secondary English instruction. She has been teaching developmental and first-year composition courses for over 10 years. Over to you, Michelle and Alexa.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here with you today, presenting this webinar on a thesis worth believing in, using critical reading to develop meaningful thesis statements. We are thrilled to be here. Alexa and I are co-authors of a textbook in development with Bedford St. Martin's Macmillan called Writing from the Inside Out, Reading for College Composition. And this textbook puts reading at the center of college writing. For our webinar today, we have 4 goals that we're going to try to work through with you. First, we're going to demonstrate how teaching effective critical reading in first-year composition is the key to unlocking students' critical writing. Second, we're going to provide an assignment question model that promotes engaging that promotes students to write engaging thesis statements.
We'll also be exploring 2 examples of students using our process of writing from the inside out to develop compelling, meaningful thesis statements and introductory paragraphs. And we'll show how students can produce these strong thesis statements based not only on a response to a prompt, but on the texts they are reading and on their own writing. So as we get started, we wanted to take a moment to talk to you about how we're defining critical reading, and also to emphasize that for us in the textbook, critical reading is a distinct process that is different from reading for comprehension or reading to make interpretations. So the work that you're going to be seeing today is what students have done with their reading after going through a variety of pedagogies and exercises to help them comprehend and make interpretations about what they're reading. And now they're at the critical reading stage, which connects directly to their writing. And that critical reading, as we define it, is making connections and generating new ideas.
So we're going to give you a visual for what that means, those 2 bullet points, making connections and generating new ideas. So when students are writing, one way of writing is to simply write in response to a prompt from their own feelings. Another way is to respond to a single text. But the way that we present using critical reading and critical writing is to move beyond a self-to-text connection and create a self-to-2 texts connection. So by having 2 texts instead of 1 text, we're creating this kind of triangle where a student is connecting not only to each of the texts individually, but is making connections between those texts. So when we say making connections, what we literally mean in the paper writing process is making connections between 2 different texts in the broadest sense. And the reason this makes critical reading and critical writing easier is that it opens up this idea in the middle of our triangle. And that center space is where the students generate their own ideas. So when you're thinking about the way we define critical reading, making connections and generating a new idea, this triangle is a visualization of the process we're helping the students to accomplish. And it's possible to do critical reading and writing in response to one text. It's possible to do critical writing in response to no texts, for those of us who are experienced at it. But for students who need some help doing critical reading and writing, setting up a situation in which they're connecting two texts together and then generating a new idea in the middle of those two texts with themselves as a point is much easier, and we've found is much more successful. So what is the role of an assignment prompt in generating student writing? I suspect many of you use prompts. It's a common practice in first-year composition and most writing classes. But what are they for and how do they work? We believe that strong prompts are easy to understand in terms of vocabulary and length, but complex to answer. We don't want the prompt to be difficult. We want answering it to produce a complex answer. So as a general rule, this may be something that you practice as well. We don't ask yes or no questions. If there's a yes or no answer, there's no reason to elaborate on it. We don't ask simple agree or disagree questions. Because we are asking them to write text-based papers, they are also prompts that allow them to create that triangle of text to self. And the prompts we write want to elicit that response immediately if the students have been working through the reading comprehension and interpretations of the essays that have been assigned. So here's the assignment question that we're going to be dealing with today. What is the American dream? You'll notice it's 3 questions, but we'll call it the assignment prompt. What is the American dream? Is it a concept still worth believing in? Why or why not? Now, one thing that I would point out to this is that a student could write a personal answer, a personal response essay to this immediately having read no texts. And we also think that is a strong prompt. If there's an immediate reaction that they can have with no prior reading, they already bring their prior knowledge to the question. It's very helpful. But if they have already read other texts, which also themselves provide answers to these questions as well, you've set up that perfect opportunity for the triangle for them to generate the new idea. So the texts for today are 2 essays, one called Swimmer by a Jamaican American named Nicole Dennis Benn. This was published, I believe, in 2018 or 19 in an anthology about what it means to be a good immigrant. And the second essay is called Why Work Doesn't Work Anymore, and it is an article by Matthew Desmond that was published in the New York Times Magazine in 2018.
So as we start to dive into the student writing here, what we want to show you first, we have 2 students that we're going to focus on today. And what we're going to show you first is their draft thesis. Now, what that means is this is their first draft of their thesis, but it's important to know that they wrote it toward the end of their first draft process. So this was not something they wrote immediately after seeing the assignment question. We're going to take you through that process a little bit, but first what we wanted to do is just show you how that triangle that was created gave space for each of the students to put in their own idea and have really different and personalized responses to this question, the same question, that is still deeply connected, as you'll see, to the 2 texts that they read. So first we have Nick's draft thesis, and it reads like this. The American dream is a conception of coming from nothing to make big money through hard work. Sure, work is important, but what you don't usually hear is anything about family. Don't you think that dream would be better if you included your loved ones? A strong family relationship is the foundation to make the American dream possible. And then we are going to look at Mariah's draft thesis. And here's what she had to say. The American dream is the idea that anyone, no matter their background, could be successful. Success meaning being financially free, owning a house and a car. It is a concept that should be destroyed for spreading misinformation. The American dream is a lie. The lower class falls for this lie and works hard for the rich to get richer. When they realize the truth, it is too late. So we're going to be working with these So we'll have time to really take in what the students are saying. But what we want to point out here is that they've each inserted their own idea into their response. And for Nick, that idea has to do with family. And for Mariah, that idea has to do with a lie. And we'll see how they came to this and where they go with it as we progress through their writing process.
Great. Before I click over, I also want to say, I should have said this before I advanced that slide, that this is the second paper prompt that they've written in the class. So this pairing, it's the second time that they've dealt with the Dennis Ben essay. It's the first paper that they are writing that has anything to do with the American dream. So in the organization process of this, they've written their first paper with another text paired with Dennis Ben, and then we carry the Dennis Ben paper over to the second paper with a new prompt and a new text, which allows them to reread the Dennis Ben essay in a new context and with a new pairing. That's part of the process of what we do. And that kind of sequencing, I know, has been done by many programs. But the point is that this topic is an entirely new topic, but a revisitation of that first essay. So where we want to go now is to Nick's topic sentences for 3 body paragraphs. And what Alexa just told you about where the draft thesis came from has a lot to do with these topic sentences. And when we talk about topic sentences, we're using a very traditional, conventional definition for that. And it's one that students have mostly learned since they began reading in elementary school and started to learn about paragraphing. We would define a topic sentence as a sentence which expresses the main idea of a paragraph. Frequently, but not always, it's at the beginnings of paragraphs, certainly in textbooks and many of the things that students read, it's at the beginning. And it's often rich in keywords that set up the main ideas of that paragraph with these strong nouns which ground the paragraph in what the paragraph is about. So what you're looking at here are the topic sentences of 3 body paragraphs in Nick's paper. I think right now I'm going to ask Alexa to talk a little bit about what I've just highlighted.
Sure. So we are going to provide everyone who's registered for this webinar with a document with all of the text from the students on it, so you can take your own deep dive into reading what they've done. But for now, we're going to focus on the key words that are in Nick's topic sentences. So in the first, we see children, then working, and then in the third one, fatherly. So these topic sentences would have been written out of a process of pulling where Nick started his writing by pulling one quote from each of these 2 texts. So within each paragraph, that idea of that triangle comes not from the entirety of one text and the entirety of another text, but a focused amount of text where he chose one quote from each, and then he developed his own idea in response to that. So what you're seeing here is the topic sentences that he developed that have these keywords: children, working, and fatherly.
So we're mostly familiar with topic sentences. I'm going to put up here now a sentence that is crucial to writing from the inside out, which is a connection sentence. This is the hinge point between those 2 quotes that Alexa was just talking about. So if we think back to that triangle, and instead of text to text, we think quote to quote, the students are asked, when they find these quote pairs, to write a connection sentence between them that will anchor as the hinge point of a body paragraph that pulls those 2 quotes together. So let's just look at the connection for the first body paragraph. These quotes contrast each other because Dennis Ben does not have any children and Desmond does. Now, visually, I hope what you are seeing here is a topic sentence, and then there's going to be other material, and then a connection sentence between these 2 quotes. And then you see it replicated again for the second body paragraph and the third body paragraph. What I want to point out to you in this connection sentence, which is, it's not a fancy connection sentence. We might not call it a beautiful sentence, but it's doing something very particular, which is helping the students organize their reading into writing. When we ask students to make connections between texts by using these quote pairs, we ask them to think before they begin working with them. They isolate them, they pull them out, they type them into a document, and we say, what kind of connection do you have? Is it a similarity? Is it a contrast? Now, they're very familiar with compare and contrast. It's the bread and butter of their writing. We also have a type of connection, which is really where most academics live their lives and write their work, which is a complication, which is to say it's not a direct similarity. They're not saying exactly the same thing. They're not saying exact opposites in an agree or disagree way, but they're finding a connection which pulls these texts together, but maybe crosswise or in some kind of way that connects with it, but complicates it, right? So in this particular example for Nick, he sees a direct contrast and he's articulating what that is. If we're focusing on the role of children between these two texts, one person has children and the other one doesn't. That's a direct contrast, and it is going to influence the idea that comes out of this paragraph. So we could do this with the other ones, but I want to note the second connection he sees as a comparison. The third is a complication. This is a wonderful thing because it shows the students how a connection isn't just a similarity. And that's actually something that they have to learn a little bit at the beginning of the semester. A connection can be a difference. A connection can be a complication. Let's see what we have next. Alexa, go ahead.
So next, what we've done is we've highlighted the keywords in the connection sentences that helped Nick, who wrote the connection sentence first, figure out this is the thing that he's looking at, and that's where he wrote that topic sentence out of. So if we look at the second topic sentence and connection sentence, one thing that we wanted to show is that, so in his connection sentence there, right in the middle of the slide, his keywords are jobs and trying. And what's so interesting about that is that both of those words work for the word working, which is what he has in his topic sentence as a keyword. And so there's a couple things going on here that are interesting, but what we'll focus on right now is that skill of understanding the synonyms that may work for the keywords is so important for them, for making connections between things that they read, for doing their own research later on, for all sorts of things, understanding how the keywords can be synonymous, and also all of the great sort of intellectual work that can happen in that space, and is really valuable for Nick as a reader and a writer. And also it leads to these really great things that we get to read in their papers as their ideas come forth.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to revisit Nick's draft thesis, the one that you read earlier, and rethink about the title of our webinar, which is A Thesis Worth Believing In. I like that because it also is the question that they're asking, is the American dream worth believing in? But what I hope that you're starting to be able to see is that our point is that to write a thesis worth believing in, the students have to actually believe in it. And if we're asking them to write text-based essays, they have to have that belief, which can come straight from their gut, attached to their reading. And then they have to negotiate their belief with the reading in these complicated ways. Sometimes they'll agree, sometimes they'll disagree, but mostly they need to know how to contextualize that reading and pull it together into sentences that they can manage themselves. So if we looked again at Nick's draft thesis, and re-emphasize that this draft thesis came after and literally in an exercise that I gave them out of their topic sentences and connection sentences. So I asked them, extract from your body paragraphs just the topic sentence of the first paragraph and the connection sentence. Extract just the topic sentence and connection sentence from the second and the third. And then what they have, because those are claims that they have made that do all of this really hard reading work, the only thing they're looking on their screen or on the page is the claims that they have made. And they've made them because they believe in them, right? And then when they look at that, they can distill from that, looking at those keywords, the kind of draft thesis that Nick wrote, because it came out of body paragraphs and reading he had already done. So we know it is very common to instruct students in comp to know what your thesis is and then do your drafting. And we have obviously flipped that on its head. And we think that is where these meaningful draft theses come from, because they are firmly invested in that response, partly because they know they have body paragraphs which already support it. The last thing I want to show you with Nick is how he turned this draft thesis after a revision process, adding another body paragraph, adding a conclusion, getting to the full draft. His final draft introduction is obviously longer. It's been built out. You can see just by glancing at it that he's added in titles and authors' names, and he has developed an actual introduction. But I'm going to ask Alexa to talk you through the highlighting in the next screen.
So what Nick did here is that after he developed that first full draft of a paper, that the last thing he wrote was the draft thesis, he then did revision work, he nailed down some things in his body paragraphs, and then he came back to the introduction. And as Michelle said, he built it out. And what's so interesting here is that you'll notice, if you see the green, which has now become his opening, his hook, is what his original thesis was. So his original ending idea in that thesis was a strong family relationship is the foundation to make the American dream possible. But then as he did that revision work, what he came to for his final thesis is highlighted in the blue at the bottom. The American dream is called a dream for a reason. It is worth giving effort towards, but for some people, their situations in life beforehand will affect if they can make it or continue to live in poverty. So I see a bunch of things here. And one of them is that he is now more directly answering the question than he was before. He's signaled ways that he's answering the question more directly. He's also gone from the very specific idea of family to a slightly broader, but still very concrete idea of people's situations in life. So he's going to focus primarily on family situations, but it also sort of has branches out to other types of situations. So it's become more complex, and it's also become a more direct response to the assignment question.
So we have another student example that does something very similar. And now that you've seen Nick, I don't need to explain the process, but I'm going to show you here what Mariah did using the same technique of building the draft thesis out of the topic sentences. So here are Mariah's topic sentences. Here are the keywords. Alexa, I'm going to power through. All right. So for her, by the way, the keywords down at the bottom, these are keywords that the students identified. We probably should have said that before. These are not our annotations for their work. They were asked when they looked at their topic sentences and connection sentences, we asked them, pull 3 keywords that are the most important to the claims that you are making. So work hard, lower class, and realization were the keywords that she pulled out of this. And one thing that's very interesting here is that realization, well, work hard and lower class lines up, but realization is an interesting one because when Alexa and I were annotating this, she chose suddenly it changes as part of the coming to a realization. Sorry, I'm stealing your thunder here, Alexa. I'm moving fast. I'm going to let you do I'm going to ask you to do the connection sentences though. So here are the additional connection sentences. Pick it up.
So as with Nick's paper, but with a very different focus, a very different topic that is personalized to Mariah, we see that she's pulled these, the key ideas in her topic sentences have come out of these connection sentences. So here's where realization and realize shows up, is in the connection sentence, which again, in that really interesting move of finding a synonym for realize, she said suddenly it changes in the topic sentence. And then more sort of directly in the second and third one, we have work hard and lower class and then work hard, that is coming from the connection to the topic sentence.
Here's Mariah's draft thesis again, with the extremely strong, stark claim that the American dream is a lie. And then I'm going to throw it back to Alexa. Here is her developed introduction for the final draft. And here are the highlights again. So Alexa, talk us through the difference between what Mariah did and what Nick had done.
Absolutely. So what you see with Mariah's is that the green, what she started out with is still her thesis statement. So when she built out this paragraph, she built in the context of the texts before the thesis, and then her hook or her opening at the top. And her thesis did not change in her revision process. Whereas what we saw with Nick's was that what he thought was his thesis turned into his hook, and his thesis changed a bit. And one of the things that's so interesting about this is seeing how even within a very clear framework that gives the students a concrete place to begin, concrete things to think about how their sentences are functioning, they're still able to have a writing process and development process that works for their particular project, their particular personality, what the way that they sort of work this through is as much them as it is anything that we're giving them. And so she started with the idea, this very strong claim that the American dream is a lie, and that is where she ended up as well. And so she developed hers in a different direction, and yet she has the same parts that Nick had. She has a hook or an opening, she introduces the text and she describes them, and then she ends that introductory paragraph with her thesis statement.
So I want to add one addendum to this, because this is all happening this fall. This question is happening this fall in their real lives. And in a post-writing survey that I give to my students, one of the questions I ask them is, what is the most important skill you've gained working on this paper? And frequently on the first paper, they talk about learning how to write an inside-out paragraph, or the various sort of tools we give in working with texts. But Mariah's answer to that question of what the most important skill was connections between real life and the paper. And so if there is an argument for writing a thesis to believe in, her post-reflection survey is certainly an answer to that. If we are able to help students make connections between real life and the writing they're doing in our classes, then I think we're doing a very good thing for them. So thank you for attending this webinar, and we hope it's been helpful to you.